Hey, corporate badasses, popping on here live on a Friday afternoon. If you live in the US, the storms are coming. So, sending so much love and best of luck. Stay safe out there. If you live on the East Coast, here I am in Berkeley, California. So, we're still only about halfway through our day on a Friday afternoon, but I'm popping on here live because I want to share something with you really, really important as we start 2026 and as you're thinking about your year, your coming year, and how you're going to begin to be seen more as that title that you deserve. So, whether you're in a vice president level role already, or you're in the C suite, or maybe you're a senior manager looking to break into executive leadership, today's conversation is going to show you how you can begin to communicate at those next levels. Now, so I'm live on here. This isn't a pre-recorded stream. So definitely, pop some messages in the chat, say hi, let me know, if you're listening. And also, I am streaming live inside of my private Facebook group for Authentically Powerful Women. Let's go. If that's something that you're interested in joining, this is a public group. You can request an invite and we'll bring you and welcome you in so that you can hear my voice, so that you can listen to some of the more strategic conversations that we're having inside of my communities and my world. If you are new to my world, let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Stacey Mayer, and you are in for a treat. I help corporate badass women get promoted to the executive suite. And on January 6th of this year, we had 3 women start new roles, new higher level leadership roles, both from a promotion standpoint and also from a transition standpoint, going from unemployment to employment, but at those like higher levels of VP and above. And one of the challenges is, hey, Christy, great to see you. One of the challenges is that you get the role and it took you a while to get there, right? Like you worked for that promotion or you worked for that new opportunity and you feel good about yourself, right? You feel like, wow, this is it. I finally got that promotion. I was just having a conversation last week with a woman who got a skip level job opportunity. So she was a director and then she was promoted into a vice president role as her next role. And she's completely qualified for this role, right? She's ready. And maybe this is you. You don't have that imposter syndrome, so to speak. You can do the job. You're already getting some wins in your new role, and that feels good. But I'm hoping, I'm hoping if you're listening today that you're like, but I want to set myself up for future success, right? Like I want to make sure that this isn't one and done. And also, you might be somebody who has had hopefully not too painful of an experience in the past where you get a new role and it doesn't quite turn out the way that you wanted it to, right? So in today's conversation, I want to talk about how you can begin to drive strategic conversations at your organization. And more importantly, like in the first 90 days, right? You don't have to earn your seat. You don't have to prove yourself first. You just can begin driving strategic conversations and from the beginning. And I actually think it's a bit easier to do in the beginning. And if you start to switch the way that you're thinking about your new role or even the role that you're currently sitting in, and you want to sort of shift the way that people are viewing you and you want to be included in those more strategic conversations, that's what we're going to talk about. So hi, Nitya and Estelle, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. So my first question for anybody who's here live, I would love to hear from you if you are still, so basically just write in the comments if you're still in the first 90 days of your new role. If you're, maybe you could also write in 90 days or 5 years or 0, whatever that might be. I'd love to get a sense of where you guys sit in your current role at your current organization or your current situation. And that can also help guide how we're going to talk about it today. So So today's conversation is how to drive strategic conversations. This can happen at any time, but it's rooted in the belief that you want to drive strategic conversations, right? So this does not go without saying. Some people really just want to do their job, right? And they just want to get in the role. They want to do a good job. And unfortunately, what happens is that's the way they start out. And then 5 years later, 5 years down the road, they're like, they haven't been promoted. They're like, how can I be included more? Something's missing. And then they feel like they have to start over again, right? So now I have to find a new job. I can't shift perception because there's already this way that people view me. And I'm here to tell you that first of all, you can shift perception just even at 5 years of being in the same role. But you can also begin to shift perception from the beginning. All right. So we have some people job hunting, some people, job hunting made redundant. 2.5 years as an individual contributor at the staff level. 90 days next week. Congratulations. That's excellent. All right. So if you are part of my Women's Leadership Accelerator, you get access to my executive promotion process. And this is part of what I'm going to talk about today. So if you've been with me for a while, you've heard this before, but I think it's a great reminder all the time to reconnect in and ask yourself this one question. So do I understand the difference, and am I communicating on a strategic level, or am I communicating strategy? Am I communicating strategically, or am I communicating strategy? And this is your takeaway for today. I'm going to talk about, I'm only on here for 15 minutes, so drop your questions quickly. But I want to point out the difference for you so that you can begin to answer this question for yourself. So we have a couple individual contributors here on today's live stream, and I 99% guarantee that when you communicate, if you're talking about anything other than like your deliverables, that you're communicating strategy. So what is strategy? This is very common for individual contributors or project managers, anything like that, where you are having a conversation and maybe it feels a little bit higher level than just, here's my work, here's my spreadsheet, here's what I owe you, here's what you ask for, whatever like that. So that's the execution side. And then when we move into the strategy piece, the place that people get stuck is they communicate about their project. So when we're talking the word strategy, we're thinking about the project. So in order for me to have success, I have to get from here to here, and I have this goal, and I'm going to communicate with my boss what the strategy is to reach that goal. And I'm going to do this first, and then this first, and then this first. And that's strategy, right? When I speak about strategic thinking, I'm talking about something totally different. Okay. And I think when women find themselves in starting to feel like they've done everything they can to get promoted or to be included or to have that seat at the table, what's really happening for them is they're speaking a lot about the strategy, but they're not actually communicating as a strategic leader. Okay. And so if you're finding yourself kind of being in that place where you're talking about how are we going to hit our goals, or maybe even if you're having conversations with peers or other leaders at the organization, and you find yourself over and over again talking about how you're going to hit your goals, that's strategy. So it can feel higher level, but unfortunately what it's going to do is going to kind of get you stuck in your role. It'd be like, oh, she's got it. She knows what she's doing. I'll let her handle that. But it's not going to do the thing that I think you most want, which is to be included, right? So when you have this strategy, the most you're going to be included in is the conversations about hitting these goals, right? But if you want to actually be seen as a strategic thinker, you have to shift into more a much higher level of the strategy of the organization Am I communicating strategically? Like what matters to other leaders? What matters to the company? What matters to our team? How are we thinking about long-term organizational structure? You're zooming out a little bit more. So when you're commenting about the strategy, and Eliza, this is a great question, right? So like, what does that sound like exactly? Is you're talking about like, hey, here's our goal. It can feel like, I always say that it sounds a little bit like talking about work, right? You're talking about work, you're talking about deliverables a little bit, but within the strategy of how are we going to reach our outcomes. This is also why I don't use SMART goals with my clients. I have a totally different system that I use to create goals that's rooted in this longer term vision. It's rooted in your values. And when you can begin to see, even for yourself in your own career development, what strategic thinking looks like, then you can apply that to your job as well. So here's an example of starting to communicate to be more like a strategic thinker. Is you have a one-on-one with your boss. Normally in these one-on-ones, you give a rundown of what you're working on. Maybe you talk about the goal in mind. And then instead, what you're going to do is you're going to say, hey, before we get into my project, which is usually where the strategies are rooted, I'd like to talk about the bigger picture. Like you could literally say that. I'd like to zoom out for a moment. Or I was having a conversation with XYZ executive, and they were mentioning that this is coming up, this problem that we're having is coming up a lot, at the offsite, right? And it's something that people are talking about at that executive level. Or this seems to be more of a global problem, like because of the what we're experiencing in 2025, or because of AI, or, it's basically anything that you're communicating on a bigger level, that's bigger than your little project, that's bigger than your little goal. And I want to remind you, if this is resonating with you, and I have an entire module on this, because I really want people to hear over and over and over again that there's a difference between speaking about the strategy and speaking like a strategic thinker, like a strategic communicator, because that's going to be the difference between you getting a promotion or not, or you transitioning from an individual contributor into a leadership role or not, right? Because they need to not only see that you can hit your goals, but they have to see that you are that strategic communicator, right? So hopefully this is resonating with you. It gives you some food for thought. And I encourage you, if you want to start applying this, just think about your next one-on-one with your boss, and how can I include some of the larger strategic thinking, the thinking behind the thinking, as I'm communicating in my next one-on-one, and see if that's something that you can begin to include. And by begin to include, it's like 10% of the conversation. It's one or two sentences. You're not going to completely shift the entire meeting that you have with your boss, but just a little bit. You're adding in some bigger picture point of view, some bigger picture questioning to the conversation. Now, I prefaced this with the idea that this is easier to do in the first 90 days. And I have a complete strategy, a total blueprint, so to speak, for how you can begin to show up in your first 90 days in your new role as this strategic leader from the beginning, right? And I do think this is a prime time to be able to build those relationships, to understand what the bigger strategy is. Why are we doing these projects? To communicate your thinking behind the thinking, right? And to begin to break out of this habit that so many of us have, because it got us to a certain level. And so I am offering a paid intensive where you can get in front of me and you can talk to me about your next 90 days. And I say your next 90 days because I know not everybody on here is actually in a role in their first 90 days, right? And so I want you to really think about your next 90 days and how you're going to show up over the next 90 days as this strategic communicator. Because The first thing I know about you is that you're good at your job, right? Like we are all hitting our goals, we're hitting our milestones. If that was the only way that we got promoted or the only way that we were included in strategic conversations, well, then I wouldn't even have a job, right? Like if that was it, because that's what we're all doing, right? And so being able to know that subtle difference, that 5%, that shift in your communication that you can begin to do to be seen as that strategic communicator, that is going to be the difference between you having success over the next 90 days or not. Thank you, Marie. Marie just dropped into the chat here where you can begin to sign up for next week's paid intensive. I stress the word paid because what it's going to do, it's going to limit the number of people that can come onto this call and ask me questions. We're going to have 75-minute deep dive into understanding what I recommend doing to set yourself up for success. I'm going to answer very specific questions at the end of the event. I'm going to leave another 30 minutes where we can really continue to have a conversation in this small, intimate group where we can all begin to lift ourselves up to that next level right at the beginning. Like wherever you are today, if you're 7 months unemployed and you just want to think about how can I communicate in my interview process more to that strategic thinking place, or even how can I communicate over the next 90 days, even though I've been in my role for 2.5 years, how can I begin to communicate in this more strategic way? Now, our goal is to be included, right? So I want to remind you that we're taking proactive effort to speak more strategically in conversations. But what you're going to notice is that the way people respond to you is differently. So whether it's through monetary compensation, actual promotions, but really more importantly, inclusion, right? Like we need to loop Stacy into this conversation. And those are kind of the clues that we're looking for when you go through this 90-day roadmap, right? You're great at your job. Now we want everybody around you to also know that you're great at your job. So this is a very low cost. Go to stacymayer.com/next to sign up for my paid intensive, $97. You get bonus video recordings, bonus templates, worksheets, where you can begin to craft exactly what it sounds like for you specifically with those words that are coming out of your mouth and how you can begin to put that into action. Now, of course, if you're in one of my programs, if you're in the accelerator, if you're one of my one-on-one clients, or you're inside the Leadership Table Mastermind, of course, you get next week's event for free. And it's included as part of your being, one of my clients. But what this is also going to do is for those of you who are new to working with me, you're going to be able to learn from them, right? Because they're going to be asking next level strategic questions to even go deeper into this process, because it's an ongoing process of learning and development and being able to understand, what does this sound like for me versus the way my boss would communicate in a more strategic way. But the good news is once you start to do this, once you really both understand the difference between strategy and being a strategic communicator, and then you actually put it into action, you will be off to the races to have more influence, more opportunities, and to begin to lift other women up to the leadership table. This is how we change the leadership table, one promotion at a time. And I am so thankful that you're here with me and that you're being a part of this conversation so that we can change collectively how we're communicating so that we can begin to have these rewards at the top. Let me know if you have any questions. Shoot me a direct message at Stacy, or just go to stacymayer.com/next. But if you're wondering if this intensive next week is right for you, please shoot me a note. This is going to be 1 in a million type intensive. I don't usually open up these conversations to the public. So this is your opportunity to get in front of me, to deep dive, to really think about your next 90 days and how you're going to set yourself up to have more recognition, power, and influence. All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you hopefully next week. Take care. Bye.